So should we bring in the closer? And
I think it'd be a good time for that.
All right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a weekend edition of the Free Baseball Podcast presented by the Athletes Hub. My name's Davis Bird. I'm joined, as always, by the bespectacled, mustachioed man known as Jake Crumpler. Good time to do a podcast. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, second one of the day. I'm locked in right now.
World-renowned podcast man, Jake Crumpler, here to talk some baseball, and we can just go right into it, and we can talk about some transactions, not a whole lot, but a few to mention. We're going to talk about one Chicago-related one, and we can talk about this Chicago-related one to start, and it's former White Sox, I guess stars, what you could call them. Not so much anymore now with the Marlins, though. It's going to be Tim Anderson signing a one-year deal to play for the Miami Marlins. It's worth $5 million. Tim Anderson, his star has really kind of fallen the last couple years, especially last year, of course, getting knocked the fuck out by Jose Ramirez. So now he can go party in Miami to celebrate his big KO loss. So what do you think about Tim Anderson? Because I know my opinion is probably a little bit stronger than yours.
I mean, of him as like a person or like his fit on
just
the
in just in general, the fit on the Marlins, and I guess as just him as a player, I guess it's just, I don't know. This Marlins team is super uninspiring, and I think Tim Anderson is sort of a microcosm of that.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely saved themselves from us really giving them a hard time when we do the offseason review and grades for the NL East, because this was their first major league signing of the entire offseason, which on its own, it's like, okay, that's going to be your biggest signing. But the fact that it's their only one, and then also that they sort of hired somebody above Kim Ng, forcing her to leave town, and then just for them to cut payroll and not add anything to a team that made the postseason for the first time since like 2003, if we count out the 2020 campaign. So it's not been a great offseason for them. The Tim Anderson fit makes a lot of sense, given that like they were going to jog out John Birdie out to shortstop. And now they'll be able to at least have Tim Anderson in there. And it's not like Tim Anderson was bad before last season. He was an all-star, I think, at least once. They don't have all-stars on Fangraphs. I wish they did, because then it forces you to go to Baseball Reference. I'm not doing that. But anyway,
I'll save you for it. I'll do it.
Thank you. He was a big star. There was a time from 2019 through 2022 during which he batted .318 across 374 games. He racked up 13.5 F4. So Tim Anderson was legit, and he had that huge moment in the Field of Dreams game where he hit that walk-off home run that sort of seemed like his signature moment, and it was really awesome. And I thought he was a player that was really exciting and fun to watch because he played with a lot of emotion and everything. But the emotions were sort of negative last year, as he just could not hit the ball at all. He struggled to hit for any power. Only one home run last year, and it took him so long to get there. And then just to pile on to all of that, the getting knocked out by Joe Ram was crazy, and that might follow him for the rest of his career. But I think it makes sense for him to join the Marlins, as they don't really have a shortstop after moving Jazz around and not really having anybody coming up from the minors. They've got Jacob Amaya, who could take over at some point if Tim Anderson doesn't get back on track. And I think Tristan Gray is an interesting non-roster invite who they got from the Rays. He's sort of like a quad A guy. He strikes out a ton, but he's been shown to have 30 home run power while playing shortstop. So that's pretty cool. But Tim Anderson makes a lot of sense on like a cheap deal like this. Hopefully he can rebound for his sake and for the Marlins' sake. But this doesn't inspire me to like change my opinion of how god awful their offseason's been.
Definitely so. And they fired Kim Ng, and that was kind of a bad move, really going.
Well, they just hired above her, and then she left.
They hired above. That's true. They basically that's true. They hired above her, which, to be honest, if you were a general manager at that point, you should leave. That's just sort of undermining your authority. I understand her leaving, and then they're now going into an offseason really where you don't have anyone in charge, and then this is kind of the move that it leads to, because they didn't really make any moves, and it's a team that like they were a playoff team a year or so ago, and now they're just kind of last year, and then they made it in 2020 as well. And it's just kind of like, all right, well, this team is not good, and still we talked last podcast, and it was about the Giants, and now I think the Marlins are in a worse spot than the Giants, but it's still more or less the same general theorem of this team is bad, but not really bad enough to be like extra bad. Like they're not going to be like Royals and A's from last year bad, but they're probably not going to win but maybe 80 games is what
I don't even think they'll reach that.
I say that I think that is their absolute ceiling, is winning 80 games. Tim Anderson, I don't necessarily think is a good baseball player. He has his strengths, and then I think he has his very glaring weaknesses, which sort of fills with the Marlins, because that infield defense looks really brutal. Not good at all, really. You have Jake Berger at third, not a good defender. You have Luis Ariz at second, also not a good defender. And Tim Anderson, historically, he's gotten better as his career has gone on, but he's not a good defender at short either. I expected him, before this deal happened, I expected him to probably catch on with one of the contending teams, most likely fitting at second and not short. And that obviously has not happened. He's going to have to try to play with the Marlins. But it's been kind of since 2021 where I think he's been really good. We talked last podcast about baseline for a big leaguer WAR-wise is 2. He's a 2 F4 player, and I think that's probably about what his ceiling is now. I think he's virtually an average big leaguer at best and pretty not good at worst. Last year he was really bad, dealt with some injury, couldn't hit for any power, not even gap power. It just wasn't very good at all. And maybe the Marlins will help him. They do have 2 batting title winners now on their team, which is something, I guess, if you're building out your roster. I just don't necessarily think Tim Anderson is a needle mover, and I don't think this Marlins team is a team looking to move the needle. I think they're just content with being right in the middle and being pretty mid, and that's just kind of what they're sort of are as a franchise. I think that's just what the Marlins are. So sure, I guess he fits that organizational culture. We can move on to a team that I think is trying to also get out of that potential realm, and that's the Pirates, who have extended their ace starter, Mitch Keller, for a 4-year deal worth $71.6 million, not 71. Mitch Keller was really good last year. He's always had huge prospect pedigree. Now he's been rewarded with this extension, and the Pirates are actually looking to spend some money now, which is always nice to see for them. I think that the Pirates, if their prospects pan out, I think they're a team that could really do some damage here in the future. It would be really nice to see them actually overcome their terrible ownership and honestly really bad organizational luck. So what do you think about the Mitch Keller move? Talk to me.
Yeah, I'm always down for guys to stay with the organizations in which they came up, and I love when teams spend money. It's announced as a 5-year, $75 million deal, but that includes his arbitration money for this year. So I just noted the years that they're adding on. But yeah, Mitch Keller was really good last year in the first half. He had a 3.31 ERA in the first half. After the All-Star break, 5.59 ERA. So he really started off really well and then struggled down the stretch. I don't know if that was an injury thing, or if I don't know what the root of those struggles were. But like you said, he's got the prospect pedigree to be a guy that pitches more like that first half self. And even still, entering his age 28 season, he just pitched 194 innings last year. So he's at least going to provide innings, which gives you a pretty good shot at providing decent WAR numbers. He's scheduled to be the opening day starter again. I like Mitch Keller in terms of fantasy. I'm not super enamored by him, but if you're in a points league, the volume that he provides makes him a guy that you can roster pretty regularly. He'll just need to perform closer to that first half than the second half. If he's a low 4s ERA guy, the amount of money that he's getting seems like a lot, but I feel like it's going to be a steal just given how much starters make nowadays. What is 71 divided by 4? It is 17.8 million, which seems pretty fair. If you think of somebody like Jack Flaherty and Michael Wacha, they get 10, 11 million per year. And then I don't know, you think about aces are in the $20 to $30 million range. I think paying Keller below that ace level allows you to make some profit on him performing closer to his first half self. And if he performs closer to his second half self, you're not paying him like an absurd amount of money, but he's still really young and showed last year that, there's another level to his game. He bumped his strikeout rate to a career high 25.5%.
Yeah, we talked about Tim Anderson and Fangraphs not showing All-Stars. Mitch Keller was the Pirates All-Star last year. And I think they have a lot of pieces for the future. I think Mitch Keller can sort of anchor that rotation. You talked about, okay, well, he was good in the first half and sort of fell off near the second half. If this money could be a huge value if he's just good. Like if he's just good and not great, I think this is still really solid value just for him to be in that rotation because they, of course, have Paul Skeens, who still might make the big league team this year. Mitch Keller, I mean, he's fine. The stuff is there. It's always been the same general issues that Mitch Keller has had consistently. Struggles walking a lot of guys and struggles throwing quality pitches in the zone. A lot of the times he's thrown like a lot. When he's getting strikes, it's typically having to get like a lot of swinging strikes, and he's not like one to really locate extremely well. I know he talked a little bit too today. I think he made his first spring training start, and he got caught by Yasmani Grandal, and he talked about Grandal helping him. We talked about Grandal's cooked ass trying to help their rotation, last podcast, and I think that Mitch Keller could potentially benefit from that. But it's a guy that's like consistently, the walk numbers have gone down, but it's still not great. He's in a division that, again, also not great, but not necessarily the biggest pitching division in the world. Wrigley's kind of a difficult one. PNC's a weird park to pitch in as well. Also Great American Small Park. It's just kind of a tough division in general to really get a foothold, throwing in a lot. But hopefully Mitch Keller, I think he can be good. He's still kind of a guy that feels really young, even though it's like not super the case, I guess. Now he's 27, which still got quite a few years ahead, and it takes it through 2028. Is that right? I guess. Yeah, so he's signed through 2028. I think the Pirates have a good chance to get a lot out of Mitch Keller, and this could be a pretty big bargain, which remains to be seen. We can talk about our next move now, which I'll pull up, and it is the Tigers. We can go from the NL Central to the AL Central. They signed Gio Urshela to a 1-year, $1.5 million deal. It's got $100,000 worth of incentives at 500, 530, 560, 590, and then again at 620 plate appearances for Gio, who's a good player, just struggled with injury again a little bit. But the Tigers kind of making a lot of value moves, adding pieces here and there to try to compete in the AL Central, which looks extremely open.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is a move that moves the needle. Right. But yeah, Urshela is a very decent player. I think he's more of just a guy. Last year, he like broke his whole knee or something. It was like, I don't even know, but it was a terrible injury. It kept him out for the rest of the year. And while he was not great with the Angels, he was very solid for the Yankees in 21 and for the Twins in 2022. It's like just to rely on him as your starting third baseman for a team that's trying to make that leap in the AL Central, which, as you said, is wide open, especially, I mean, we're about to discuss the whole division, but like with the Twins not doing much, like the Tigers have a clear path to take over that first place spot in the division. But when you're making moves like this, obviously it brings up your floor, but I'm not sure Gio Urshela's the move that really gets you to the playoffs. He's a decent defender, and he can hit like 15 home runs and, produces pretty high batting averages. Like he could bat 270 with 15 home runs, which is very decent, but it's not like the high ceiling play you're hoping for a team to make that's trying to make a run to the playoffs.
I agree. And it's weird to try to like pin him in as more or less like the everyday third baseman. It's got to have some other move. It has to have some other move for this to feel okay. If they platoon him to hit lefties, because he's always been a guy that just mashes lefties, and it's a division that's got quite a few pretty decent lefty starters. I mean, the Royals have a pretty solid one too. Now Cole Reagan's like, if he can just hit lefties, okay. It'll be fine. It's really a cheap deal. It's less than $2 million. And they've added some pieces that are value signings because I don't really think that they're necessarily going to be like big spending because the last time they did that, look what happened. They got Javier Baez and then he's pretty bad. So I like the Urshela signing. It's really not, it's a nothing signing. It's just he probably can't be playing third every single day.
No, that lineup is not great right now.
So it's really not. But again, I mean, he's back in the Central. If he can stay healthy, the last time he was in the Central, he played with the Twins, and he posted a pretty solid season, 2.4 F4, and he had a 119 WRC plus. Like that's good. Like you can get by with that. It's just he really can't be the answer for you at third if you're going to try to contend to win a division.
Exactly.
We can go to our last move, which happened late last night. We were talking about it, and it's the Chicago Cubs re-signing Cody Bellinger to a 3-year deal worth $80 million. Talked a little bit about the Twins. This is really similar to the Carlos Correa deal. He got a short deal. It's 3 years, $80 million. It's got an opt-out after 2024 and 2025. He's going to make $30 million the first year. So this year, he's going to be making $30 million. This actually will be the Cubs' first player they've ever paid $30 million for a single season. 2025, he'll make $30 million. And then if he does not opt out after 2025, he'll make the remaining $20 million in 2026. Cody Bellinger had sort of a bounce back season last year. And then he's one of the Boras guys that's kind of hung around free agency and really hasn't signed until super, super late now. And I think there's a few reasons for that we'll probably get into. But I would love to hear your take on it first.
Yeah, I love this. The Cubs felt like they had a really good offseason, but it just was missing that cherry on top to really make it go from like a we'll get there in a couple of weeks, but like a B offseason to get it to an A. And I feel like this did that. It just a huge move to bring him back. We saw how integral he was to the lineup last year, and adding him just lengthens the lineup so much, especially moving somebody like Mike Tauchman to the bench, allowing Bellinger to hit in the middle of that order, taking the pressure off of Happ and Suzuki. And I love it. He's a great defender too in center field, and the whole team was pushing for it. So now that they got their guy, I feel like they gotta feel a lot better about their chances next year, because last year it was a weird situation, and that, you transfer everything over to Jed, and then he didn't go all in and was sort of towing the line, and it was just not enough for them to make the playoffs. So I felt like going into this offseason, if they sort of did the same, you'd really start losing hope. And it seemed like that, because didn't they take forever to sign anybody?
Yeah, they previously their first move was Imanaga, and it took them almost through I think they signed him to start of January.
Yeah, and that's
like anyone.
That's super late. And so there was like this growing feeling of, oh man, the Cubs are going to do it again, and they're going to disappoint everybody. And it's going to be like, you're going to have clear issues that could have been addressed during the offseason, and they just didn't do it. But then, they started going crazy. They found the deals that they got. And I feel like they've been, despite like making everybody wait so long on this deal and the Imanaga deal, they really got some steals. I think the Imanaga deal is the best deal of the offseason. And this one, just getting Bellinger on a short-term deal so that you don't block the young outfielders you have coming up from the minors, is just absolutely perfect, because you got guys like, Pete Crow Armstrong and Alcantara and Canario and Davis and Owen Casey, all these guys that are really good, or should be really good, and you don't want to block them with like a 12-year deal for Bellinger. So getting him for 3 years might even be better. And he's probably going to opt out after 2025 just to maximize the amount he can earn. But yeah, I love this deal. Obviously, the fit was really good last year, and it should be again this year.
Yeah, we've talked about it time and time again, even just not on the podcast. The outfield kind of logjam that they have with prospects kind of makes this deal a little bit more difficult. He obviously played center pretty much exclusively last year, ended up getting a lot of first base time around about when like Pete Crow Armstrong was coming up, and they sort of had to reshuffle the roster a little bit. The thing is, like, the long-term deal for Cody Bellinger was extremely weird, because okay, well, he plays center. If you're going to give him a huge deal, you're going to have to likely move him to first at some point. And then I think this deal is really good, both for the Cubs and for Bellinger. You talked about him maximizing the amount of money that he can get. Last year, obviously, was a resurgent year for him. He obviously had the huge MVP year, and then looked like the next star of the game, and then kind of struggled with injury and then struggled with inconsistency once he came back from that. And then last year was really good. He was just a really solid player, got to play every day, posted a 134 WRC plus, 4 F4, pretty solid defender. And then now I think he's somewhere in between both of those. I think like last year, all right, that's probably what Cody Bellinger is most likely going to be. I don't think he's really going to be an MVP guy. He has that potential, but I don't think that's really going to be what Cody Bellinger is. And if you sign him to this huge deal and then you have to move him to first, and then he's only posting like a 115 WRC plus, and you're paying him $30 million a year, like, all right, yeah, you made a huge mistake. So I think the deal is really good. It's just now the Cubs can really try to plan to win the division. It's a pretty open division now, but it does kind of just put their lineup exactly where they had it last year, which is sort of a weird spot to be in. But I think the Bellinger move is really good all around. It's kind of I really like the Carlos Correa deal comparison. Hopefully it can just pan out a little bit better than Correa.
So how does Pete fit into all this? Pete Crow Armstrong, how does he fit into this? Because he debuted last year, so I would expect him to, at least be up by May this year. And he's a guy that's mostly known for his defense. So he plays center field and Bellinger goes to first.
I think they will probably do that. Or one of the plans that I've seen is that, say, Suzuki will likely move to DH somewhere because he's struggled with injury. And I think they want to try to get the most out of him that they can. So Bellinger is probably either going to play first. And Michael Busch is probably not going to be an everyday player, or they're going to move, say, Suzuki to DH, and Cody Bellinger will play right. I think Pete Crow Armstrong definitely is not going to start the year on the big league team. Like he's been, he's
got blue hair, bro.
He does have blue hair. He was good in the minors the last 2 years, really, and then really struggled in the majors, struck out way too much. He walked a pretty decent amount, just didn't really hit almost at all. But I'm not sure exactly. I think right now, one of the ones that looks like he's probably going to end up stealing a roster spot to start, though, is Brandon Davis, because he's actually been a lot better in spring training. So, and then he's an older prospect, so they're going to probably have to do something with one of these guys. You mentioned like 5 names, and all of them are going to be up in the next year or two, or should. So
then maybe PCA, if and when he does come up, is like the 4th outfielder. Like they're not like sort of starting him and allows Bellinger to stay in center, and then he sort of fills in as like a defensive replacement center or 4th outfielder type guy. I feel like that makes sense. So. There's no reason to like rush him, especially if his bat's not really ready, and they have plenty of other guys. But like right now, like I don't know, you're not really relying on Miles Mastrobuoni and Mike Tauchman to like remain on the team. Those guys aren't going to prevent guys like Davis or Pete to come up and, at least come off the bench. But I think it affords the team a lot more depth and flexibility in terms of how they run out the team, just allowing Bellinger to switch between all outfield spots and first base with, I don't know. It's like right now you got Morel penciled in as the DH, and that guy can play both third, a little bit of second. You probably don't want him at second. I don't think I don't think Horner's going to want to give that up. But with Nick Madrigal sort of penciled in at third, maybe Madrigal's more of a bench guy, and Morel plays third, and then you have
Morel
DH just wide open.
Morel is likely going to play third. He's actually
open.
been playing mostly at third so far in spring training and camp. I think Madrigal is going to drop to the bench. I think Pete Crow Armstrong, if he makes the roster, is going to be as the 4th outfielder. But I think I would rather, if that's what you're going to do with him, start him in the minors and just let him get more at bats.
Okay, I sort of see how it works then, because then it's like Madrigal replaces Mastrobuoni as like the utility infielder. Morel moves to third. You can move Suzuki to DH or just have people, shuffle through there, and then get Tauchman off the roster and put PCA there. And I guess there is sort of room for everybody. You just like that depth and flexibility is actually probably super nice.
Yeah, I think Seiya is probably going to be the biggest fit at DH, and then you kind of have to fill spots with like in that corner outfield spot if PCA is going to play. But like at some point, if you talked about him as a defensive replacement, they have a chance to trot out like a really ridiculous defensive lineup, which would be a Gold Glove second baseman, Gold Glove shortstop, Nico Horner, Dansby Swanson, Cody Bellinger's won a Gold Glove. he's won more than one. Ian Happ was a Gold Glover last year in left, and then Pete Armstrong was a minor league Gold Glover last year in center. So I mean, you could have theoretically 5 Gold Glovers just in your lineup. Like that's pretty good for any
That's
pitching
perfect
staff.
for the rotation.
Yeah, the rotation's not like other than Imanaga and kind of Steele. They're not really huge stuff guys.
They're ground ball guys.
They're ground ball guys, and it's a good defense to put behind them. So I think I like the way they've constructed this roster around what they have, because it's kind of clear the Cubs have spent money, but they're not like Dodgers spending money. So I mean, they're maximizing what resources they have available, and I think that's what you got to do. Good move for Bellinger. It's just I want to see where they take it from here. If there's anything else, they kind of have they have a good problem to have, and they have a lot of that outfield prospect depth, and they have a lot of young starting pitcher depth, and they just don't really have spots for every single person. It'll be interesting to see what they do with it. If they might try to make a trade for somebody that can help them in the short term, remains to be seen. But finally, some good times, hopefully, to be spoken about for Chicago.
Yeah.
We can go right to our AL offseason review and grades, and we can talk about some probably not so good times for another team from Chicago.
Yeah, AL Central offseason review and grades. Go check out the last episode that came out on Wednesday to see our reviews and grades of the AL East. Next week, we'll do the AL West and so on until the season begins. But we'll start off going in alphabetical order of the city of the team. We'll start with the Chicago White Sox. They added Jared Schuster, Nicky Lopez, Mike Soroka, Paul DeJong, Eric Fetty, Max Stassi, Martin Maldonado, Tim Hill, Chris Flexen, John Brebbia, Prelander Barua, Dominic Fletcher, and Mike Moustakas. And they lost Elvis Andrus, Mike Clevenger, Liam Hendricks, Tim Anderson, Aaron Bummer, and Gregory Santos. So there were a ton of moves coming out of the White Sox, and it's pretty clear that they were going for the add a bunch of talent and hope something works out, because they're entering another rebuild.
Yeah, they're gonna be bad. They're gonna be bad, but instant thought is not like all doom and gloom, I guess, for their offseason, because they have added some pieces that have some potential to just not be terrible. And I think you could point the finger at a bunch of teams already, like the Marlins, for example. We talked about them earlier. Their offseason is super, super disappointing. The White Sox are at least adding guys, so you can't be like, oh, well, they've done nothing and they're just content to be bad. They're going to be bad, but they're trying to get something out of it. And I think I'm okay with that. Obviously, they made the trade with Atlanta and ended up with Mike Soroka, Nicky Lopez, Jared Schuster, Eric Fetty. I think will be an interesting one to talk about. And then they've added a bunch of other guys here. I know they posted a graphic that everyone was clowning because their preseason graphic to start the season had Martin Maldonado in it. It's oh God, but that's rough. But I'm not super hating on the White Sox offseason.
Yeah, I just like teams to have directions when they go into the offseason.
That's
if
true.
If you're trying to compete, go get guys to compete. If you're trying to sell and start a rebuild, then do it. Go all in. Don't tiptoe around that middle ground area, which is what I usually just hate when teams do, when they're just well, we'll sort of just see what happens. We'll add a couple guys, we'll let go of a couple guys, and hopefully just the roster shuffle will work out. And I think the White Sox here have a clear direction that they are at the beginning stages of a rebuild. Obviously, they haven't sold the big names like Luis Robert or Andrew Vaughn or, even Moncada and Jimenez and Dylan Cease especially. But, they started to get rid of some guys. They traded Aaron Bummer. They let Tim Anderson walk and Liam Hendricks as well. And they traded Gregory Santos, which is weird, but I feel like, the trade of Bummer was the big one. And I think next offseason, after this 2024 is probably going to be just god awful. But after another season like that, then they'll probably be okay, yeah, it's time to really go all in and trade everybody. You don't have to do it all in one go. You want people to be at the height of their trade value. And I feel like Luis Robert probably was at the height of his trade value after just an incredible season last year. Nonetheless, they went out and did exactly what I thought they would do. And I think they got some pretty decent talent, though I wish they went more for prospects than they did for like major league ready guys, because it does sort of feel like that's taking a step away from the direction of selling and competing in a few years or something, because guys like Soroka and Schuster and Baroa and Dominic Fletcher are all going to be guys that are major league ready right now. And the signings that they made, Fetty and stuff, it's like, if he's major league ready right now, what are you just going to like trade him at the deadline or something? You have him for a couple of years. So it does sort of feel like if I were going to give them a grade off how good they were at rebuilding this offseason, it wouldn't be an A, because they didn't just go, we want all the high upside prospects. They're just like, we still want guys that are going to play for our major league team. Obviously, that might be a necessity given how terrible their major league team is. So they're just like, we just need guys to trot out there right now because we're so bad. But I think for me, this is more of a C, in that they had a direction, but I'm not sure they did it super well, because they brought in a lot of talent, but it's talent that's going to be playing right away, and they're not going to be competitive while these guys are running out their service clock.
I think I'm a little bit more positive on that front, just because looking back to where they were at the end of last season after making the trades, the deadline to sort of tear it all down, and then building here. I think the pieces that they got, I'm happy with. Like you get an interesting reclamation project, and it's sort of a long-term flip, I guess, because I don't think this rebuild is going to be done in like 3 years. This is not a fast-track rebuild. They didn't get rid of Luis Robert. They didn't get rid of Andrew Vaughn. That's okay. There's a few guys that I probably would have moved, but it's probably a little bit more difficult to get an interesting package around like Eloy Jimenez, who's been really injured, only really can DH, never really going to play left field for you that much. Dylan Cease was your big trade chip, but honestly, like there's not a lot of teams, I think, that were probably offering a ton that were a good fit for them. So probably holding him until maybe in the season, maybe a little before the deadline, where they can trade him and still get something. I think that I'm happy with them getting guys like Soroka and getting guys like Schuster. I think the Dominic Fletcher one I'm really happy with, because he's extremely young and I think he's got huge upside, and I think he'll still probably be around and that they can probably pay at like a discounted rate. I don't think he's going to be one that's going to be making a ton of money if they do choose to extend him, but I'm pretty happy with the Soroka reclamation project. I like that plan. They got relievers that I think are easy flips, like John Brebbia, stuff like that. They made moves that I'm happy with. Eric Fetty too. That guy's like, I mean, he's going to give you innings. They got him specifically just like, all right, be a guy in the rotation, give us innings. If you're good, we're 100% going to trade you. Like
he was really good in KBO.
Well, he's in KBO. That's like being really good.
He was the best pitcher in KBO.
That's true. But Drew Rosinski was the best pitcher in KBO, and he wasn't very good for the A's, and then he got hurt. So I mean, like Eric Fetty could be good. You're taking a lottery ticket here. Like I'm not saying Eric Fetty sucks. Like he could be really good. But the White Sox basically signed him acknowledging like, all right, if you're really good, we're going to trade you to a team that doesn't suck like us. Like, I think I would give them a B. I'm pretty happy with how they've done this. I understand like the high upside prospects, but if you look at their top prospects at the end of last season, they have guys that are like that. I mean, the 4 of their top 5 are under 22. And they're all right around like the AA level, like single A, AA. They have guys that could come up soon as well, like Jose Rodriguez, Brian Ramos. They have Nick Nastrini. They have a lot of other guys that I think are interesting names for you there. And I don't think that they wanted to overload that sort of level. I think they wanted guys that were like, all right, we can get you. And if this rebuild is going to take longer than expected, we have guys to flip for more prospects similar to that. It's kind of towing the line, which I don't typically like, but the White Sox, like they're not good. Plus the AL Central is really, really bad. Like if the White Sox just kind of get lucky and catch lightning in a bottle, because they still have some guys in their lineup that aren't terrible. Eloy Jimenez, when he's playing, can hit. Andrew Vaughn, same thing. Luis Robert. I mean, like if the White Sox somehow just are good and Mike Soroka plays and is good and they win 84 games, that could genuinely win the AL Central, which is pathetic.
When are they doing that?
I was like this year.
What?
I would say I'm saying like it's a non-zero possibility because the AL Central is that bad, like that bad top to bottom that if the White Sox just aren't complete garbage and win like 83 games, that could potentially have them in the chance to win the Central, because that division
would be
sucks.
crazy.
It would be
That
crazy.
would
I'm not saying it's going to happen.
crazy.
That's like a sub 5% chance, but like they have guys that aren't ass.
Sure.
You can't really say that about every team in the division. Every team in the AL Central is a little ass. Like they're a little ass at
You just
something.
want to be less ass than others.
That's the thing. Like, are the White Sox so ass they can't win the Central? I don't think so. Division,
I think they're worse than the A's.
They might not be worse than the A's. I don't think they're that bad. I'll give them a B. I like what they. Yeah, they got John Brebbia. He's good.
They got John Brebbia. He's already injured. Their bullpen is so bad that
it's bad, but
their top setup men are both non-roster invitees over the age of 36. Jesse Chavez and Brian Shaw.
That's pretty good. What about Tim Hill? He's not awful. Garrett Crochet.
The thing is, also 34. And then they signed Corey Knebel and Dominic Leone. So that's going to be their bullpen.
Yeah.
A bunch of starting pitcher reclamation projects as relievers and a bunch of old dudes. Yeah. So their bullpen just going to blow all their saves. Just going to blow all their wins.
Jesse Chavez already started against the Cubs and he got absolutely smoked too.
Well, he's bad on every team that's not called the Braves. So once he gets traded at midseason, was he?
Yeah, he was good for the Cubs.
Once he gets traded to the Braves, I think he'll take off. When did he play for the Cubs?
They traded for him a few years ago. That was the same year they traded for Nick
2018 and 2022. In 2022, he had a 6.35 ERA with the Cubs, but in 2018, he had a 1.15 ERA.
Yeah, he was gas with the Cubs.
There we go. Only 6 years ago.
Yeah, that was good. He was good then.
All right.
I don't know. I think I'm happier with the White Sox choice of how to rebuild than I think you are. I'd give them a B.
I still don't think we know. I feel like this was like the appetizer.
They could probably still do more if they tear it down.
Well, they have to do more, or else it's not really a rebuild.
It's the White Sox; they don't have to do anything smart.
Yeah, but it's like if you don't trade Luis Robin, you're like, he's part of our next core. I'm like, I don't think you're gonna make a team good enough to catch him before he's off your team. But yeah, I mean, they got to trade Cease at some point. I think he's a free agent in 3 years.
Trading Cease.
They have time though, is the thing, and I feel like they might just wait. But we'll see. I do feel like they could do something really interesting with this team, but right now it's sort of like the future is really hazy right now. I like that. I think that makes it really difficult to talk about.
Fair.
All right, we can move on to the Cleveland Guardians, who added Scott Barlow, Davison De Los Santos, Austin Hedges, Ben Lively, Estevan Florial, and Carlos Carrasco, while losing Reynaldo Lopez, Lucas Giolito, Cole Calhoun, Cal Quantrill, Eniel De Los Santos, Oscar Gonzalez, and Christian Bethancourt. And I don't think I'm a real big fan of this offseason. I mean, they did the classic Guardians thing of just not doing anything. They're not going to spend money. They sign like guys on the fringes of the roster. But a lot of the names that they lost in free agency weren't like guys that they were ever going to keep around. Raylo and Giolito were guys that they claimed for September. Mm-hmm. So they weren't even really on their team. So they probably weren't factored into their future. So then they really only lost Cal Quantrill, which is fine. The Rockies gave up something for him. And then De Los Santos, which in return you got Scott Barlow. So I feel like you can sort of just disregard the subtractions and just worry about they brought in Scott Barlow and Estevan Florial, and that's about it. They did nothing.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same general path as that. It's a Guardians offseason, and they've added nobody of major consequence. Scott Barlow's good with an asterisk, because sometimes that guy's just dog shit. And he was pretty bad last year to start with the Royals. He picked it up with the Padres, but he was bad for half the season. And then you added Estevan Florial, who is a fourth outfielder, maybe gonna steal a corner spot.
I think he might steal Miles Straw's spot.
Yeah,
that's what I've been reading.
There's a chance. Miles Straw's really bad.
Yeah.
Austin Hedges is a World Series champion. There you go. Austin Hedges, World Series champion.
Good clubhouse guy.
This feels like a Guardians it's a Guardians off season. I think it's a D for me. They didn't add really anyone. And I would love to see the Guardians do that, because I think if they just add a few pieces, like I had them in our predictions to get like JD Martinez. Like I feel like if they spent just a little money, kind of like what they did, like, oh, they got Josh Bell. Fine. Okay, we'll go get JD Martinez, add him to your lineup, get maybe one guy, like one other guy on like a shortish deal, like, and just go with that. And they probably win that division running away. And they didn't do that because it's the Guardians and they refuse to actively try to win ever. So yeah, it's a D. I just, you can't add almost nobody and have it be a really good offseason when you're a team that's still missing quite a few pieces.
I think I have to agree because I do really like this team. I love their ability to develop pitching. So it's like they're never going to run out of pitching. And I feel like their offense is at one of the best points it's been in the last few years, just like being able to build around Joe Ram and have Josh Naylor and a few young guys coming up. It does get somewhat interesting, but they do feel like, as always, they're missing that big power bat in the middle, which Josh Naylor is sort of that, but like he didn't even surpass 20 home runs last year. He's a big guy and he hits the ball hard, but he's not like a guy that's going to surpass 30 home runs. And they sort of need that. They need somebody to be dangerous in the middle of the lineup, and Ramon Laureano batting fifth is not going to be that guy. Their pitching is great, and their offense, I sort of like how they build their offense around guys that don't strike out a lot. But like I said, they just need a slugger in there, and they tried it with Josh Bell. It didn't work. They got rid of him. And I think Esteban Florial is basically the only addition of consequence there. And I think he could actually be really interesting, change of scenery candidate. The Yankees just really never gave him a shot, which was sort of messed up because he had such great numbers in the minor leagues. He feels like he might be a quad A guy because he strikes out so much. But I think we talked about this when it happened, going to the Guardians where they have just a lineup full of guys that don't strike out. Maybe they'll be able to give Florial some tips on how to avoid striking out. And he's a big power speed guy, but yeah, I think I'm also a D here because they did nothing. It could have been worse. It could have been an F if they traded guys away and didn't get enough in return. But I think where they're at right now, I love their pitching staff. Just wish their offense had a little more oomph in it. And maybe Kyle Manzardo ends up being that, but I don't think he's going to start the year with the team. So I'm on a D as well. Speaking of Ds, how about the Detroit? Oh, I should have said D's nuts. Detroit Tigers. They added Mark Canha, Kenta Maeda, Andrew Chafin, Jack Flaherty, Shelby Miller, Keston Hiura, and the aforementioned Gio Urshela. They lost Matt Boyd, Jose Cisnero, Miguel Cabrera, who retired, Eduardo Rodriguez, Austin Meadows, and Spencer Turnbull. And then they extended Colt Keith so that he can start the year on the Major League roster. I think the Tigers are just so close to being like the top team in this division, and they just are like scared to do it.
Yeah, I think that sort of fits. Like you talk about like the additions, and it's like a real who's who of like
mid.
Like, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It feels like an MLB The Show team where they just sign a million free agents that are just like guys that are there.
Which like there's some situations where that works. Like I don't know, we'll get to the Royals where it's just like they were so bad that it's like adding average major leaguers is a step up. And so sometimes just adding bulk major league caliber players that are average is sometimes a step up from, relying on super young guys or guys that suck. And so maybe that'll be the step that gets them closer to contention. But this does feel like a team that if they added a big bat in the lineup, like they did with Baez a couple of years ago, or they added a guy in the rotation that you could really rely on, I would feel a lot more confident with the team, but that's really not the case.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I'm at with him too. It's just like I'm a bigger fan of some moves than others. Like I really like the Kenta Maeda move. I think he's rock steady. I think he's been in that division. I think he's really good if he's just given the amount of innings and can actually throw. Jack Flaherty, I think he's an interesting reclamation project. The jury's out on whether he's good or not. I think there's a few that like here that are solid. I would be okay with being like, all right, well, you got something here. I like Mark Canha. I think that's a good guy to have in your lineup. It's just, we talked the same way about Ramon Laureano hitting fifth. Is Mark Canha the guy in your lineup you want hitting fifth for a team that you want to win the division with? I really don't think so. Same thing with guys like your Gio Urshela, like, and your Keston Hiura's. Like, Keston Hiura definitely has his issues. Gio Urshela doesn't play enough baseball, and honestly is only really a one-dimensional player. When he does, it's like, all right, well, what? How much better did you get? Like, how much better did this roster get? Or did you just add a
Yeah.
bunch of guys that kind of keep you around about the same level, if not maybe raising it by like a couple wins, and that's it? Like, that's what it feels more like to me.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's like they won 78 games last year. So it's like
mhm.
if you think they're now closer to 500 or right around like, 82, 83 wins, that might be enough to pull it off,
Yeah.
especially if you
Mhm.
like have good luck either with a breakout or just like, things go right. Everyone stays healthy, whatever. It might be just enough to get you there. But this is a team where it's like if you did one big addition, that might be all it takes to bring this team over the edge. And maybe they're sort of uh triggered by the Javier Baez signing, where it's just like we went all in to like, go get our shortstop of the future and be like, all right, this is now we're going to start competing. And it just was so bad that maybe they're like, maybe we should go for the quantity over quality approach.
Yeah, and I sort of get that. The one thing that I am a big fan of from their offseason is the extension for Colt Keith. And I know we're not doing pluses, but that would be the only thing that would drag them out of being a normal C and put them to C plus, because it's not quite good enough for me to be like, oh yes, B offseason. I think it's C. Like, it's fine. It's extremely
Mid.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
See.
perilously mid is what I would call it. Like,
Yeah,
your team's probably in danger of being exactly the same as it was last year.
exactly.
Just yeah, I would
Yeah.
go with C, super mid.
I think I'm on the same page there as well. That lineup just lacks something in the middle. Basically, same thing as the
Mhm.
Guardians, where they have guys to build around. I think Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson are legit. Colt Keith could finally
Yes.
get there, and they have role players that could be decent enough. The rotation is interesting. Has young guys that could come up and help. And while the bullpen could use some work, they've been done a pretty good job of getting interesting guys in there at the very least. But yeah, it just feels like they're missing like one like all-star caliber name or close to all-star caliber.
Yeah.
And yeah, the whole offseason just feels a bit mid, and that's a C for me as well. We can move on to the Kansas City Royals, who sort of did a similar thing to the Tigers and the White Sox in that they went for a lot of quantity and no real big names, but they got Kyle Wright, Nick Anderson, Garrett Hampson, Will Smith, Chris Stratton, Seth Lugo, Michael Waka, Hunter Renfroe, Adam Frazier, and John Schreiber. And they lost Brad Keller, Zach Greinke, Josh Staumont, Jackson Kowar, Dylan Coleman, Taylor Clark, Edward Olivares, and Samad Taylor. But they also had the huge extension of Bobby Witt Jr., which I think that by itself might push them up a whole tier.
Yeah. I mean, I think this one, oh God, as bad as it sounds, I think this is the strongest offseason from this division.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they've added, you talked about it, like, oh, the Royals were so bad last year,
Mm-hmm.
mainly due to their roster sucked. And then
Yep.
all of their good players that were not named Bobby Witt Jr. got hurt. It was like basically at the end of the season, it was Cole Reagans and Bobby Witt Jr. the only reasons that you should ever watch the Kansas City Royals. But they've added a lot of guys that I think are super interesting that you can point to as like, okay, these are major additions to this team. Will Smith, I mean, the team that's had Will Smith the last 3 years has won the World Series. So that's one to start with. I think Chris Stratton adds to that bullpen a lot. Seth Lugo, same things. They stretch him out, and he's going to be in the rotation. He's better than a lot of the guys that they have because they just really struggled to develop pitching. We can even I talked about Cole Reagans. He's not a Royals pitching prospect. He's a Rangers pitching prospect. So I mean, he's good. I like Hunter Renfroe. I like the addition of Adam Frazier. I think he's rock steady. John Schreiber, same thing. Like, they've added guys that are good. Like, not great, but good to a team that desperately needs them. They're going to be getting back Vinny Pasquantino. I think and then they extended Bobby Witt Jr. I think this one's a really solid B for me. I'm really happy with how the Royals approach this offseason because I like the Royals. I really think they're great for baseball. They have an absolutely immaculate ballpark. The Negro League Hall of Fame's right there. Like, that's a huge team for baseball when they are good. And I would really like to see them finally be good again because they haven't been good since 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like crying out for the Royals to at least be watchable good, not like that's a team full of baseball players.
Yeah, I really think this team could take like a 15 game improvement from last year, which
Mhm.
if that's still not good, it's still like 71 wins, but 15 games is huge. And it's like, if they make it 20, they are fighting for that first place.
Mhm.
And you're right. Like the additions that they made are very solid. There's nobody that stands out like, oh, this guy's going to be like the heart of the team, or he's going to be an all-star next
Mhm.
year. But it's enough, like as I was saying before, enough step up from the sub replacement level guys that you had before, that now you're looking at pretty solid. Like they entered last season with Brady Singer and Jordan Lyles as their 1-2 in the rotation. That is
Yeah,
so
not
bad.
good.
Now they're their 4-5, because obviously you have the midseason addition of Reagans, but then you throw in Waka and Lugo, moves everybody down. You don't have to rely too much on guys that aren't great starting pitchers. And the lineup, like you said, is going to get an improvement from Vinny being there all season, but then also having Bobby Witt continue to be one of the best players in baseball. And I really think this lineup is going to grow a lot. Michael Garcia, I think, is really sneaky. In fantasy,
I do
he's like a
too. I
wide
like
awake
him a
sleeper
lot.
right now. Yeah, everybody's super in on Michael Garcia. Right now, they got him batting ninth, but I think this is a guy that could be batting leadoff by like May.
I'm a
And
big fan of
that
Michael
lineup,
Massey too.
yes, that lineup becomes really interesting if everything's if all the cylinders are working. And the improvements that they made to their bullpen, going from one that was so bad last year, so terrible. They basically replaced everybody from that bullpen. They lost like 4 or 5 guys from the bullpen, and they replaced them with veterans that you can rely on, like Will Smith, John Schreiber, Nick Anderson, and Chris Stratton. And then you've got these guys that debuted at the end of last year, James MacArthur and John McMillan, that are both really interesting in their own rights, while still maintaining guys from last year, like Carlos Hernandez, who throws 100 miles per hour, but just hasn't been able to find success. So like from top to bottom, it's like you can see how everything works out. I wish their starters were a little bit better, but with Reagans as your ace and just, innings eaters from there, yeah, I'm also going with a B, because they really put themselves in a good position to just take a huge step forward this year.
Yeah, I think I had them as like my hot take. Like I think they're going to win the division. That was like my super hot take from when we did that a couple podcasts ago. And I really think that it's I'm going to stick with it's and I was going to say it's impressive. It's hard to call it that because their team was so bad last year, but I really, really like how they've approached this offseason. They've just added guys that are good to a team that desperately needed good baseball players. Imagine that formula working out. Well, hey, our
Wow.
team sucks. Let's sign some players that are pretty good at baseball. They've done that in kind of droves. I think their lineup has huge potential. I like Vinny Pasquantino. Nelson Velasquez, I think, has a chance to be a 30 home run hitter. And he's penciled in at like 7. You talked about like Michael Garcia at 9. Velasquez penciled in at like 7 for them as like their everyday DH. They have guys that I think are really solid in this lineup that have potential to really kind of make a run for this division. I think it's the strongest lineup in the division if all things are working. And that's including like the Guardians, who have like J-Ram and the Twins, who sort of got worse, I guess. But I really, really like the Royals offseason. I just can't call it A because there's not like the star power to really bump it up to be like, for them to be like, oh yeah, I think they're a playoff team now. I think they have a chance. And that's like saying something considering just how bad the Royals have been.
Yeah, it's crazy that they could have, like, they were like one big move away from being like a team that's projected for 85 wins. But like, it's not unprecedented. It doesn't happen often that a team goes from last place to first place, but we see it happen every once in a while. Every once in a blue moon, a team goes from last place to first place from one year to another. And this is maybe the most perfect candidate in all of baseball to do so. But we can move on to our final team, the Minnesota Twins. And I did not realize how bad their offseason was until I put this together. They added Josh Staumont, Justin Topa, Anthony DeSclafani, Carlos Santana, and Steven Okert. And they subtracted Emilio Pagan, Tyler Mahle, Kenta Maeda, Joey Gallo, Michael A. Taylor, Sonny Gray, Jorge Polanco, and Nick Gordon. And they added basically Santana and Okert. The rest of the guys are fringe. And then they lost like Maeda, Gallo, Pagan, Taylor, Gray, Polanco, Gordon, all guys that were super integral to the team last year. And I know it's because like they don't have there's something with their TV deal where they're not going to be making as much next year, or it like fell through some weird thing like that. And so they have to slash payroll. And that is just so ass after they finally made the postseason and won a postseason game for the first time in like 20 years. And now they're just like, now we got to take a step back. And I still think this team is positioned pretty well to win the division, but the fact that they like didn't double down and be like, hey, we make a couple solid additions right now, we got a really good chance at like maintaining this division for years to come. But here we stand, and they've had just an ass offseason.
Yeah, it's been kind of a rough one for the Twins, who after last season, it really sucks that they can't add more to sort of continue to build here. But they've added a few pieces specifically to their rotation and bullpen with like Disco and Justin Topa. I guess that you could be like, oh, that's not that bad. Like Steven Okert, Justin Topa, they're 30, 33 and 32 year old relievers. And then Anthony DeSclafani's 34 and he's your 5 starter. And that's like, that's what you're hanging your hat on with this. And it's like, oh, it's so bad. I don't know. I don't know what to place it. I think it's sort of a Blue Jays kind of situation where the payroll slashing is an unfortunate reality. It's like, well, the Blue Jays didn't get anybody, but they tried. It's like the Twins, this is all they sort of could do, but it's what they did do sucks. So it's like, I think it's not bad enough for me to call it an F, but it's definitely a D, and it's verging on F for me because it's like, all right, well, your team has gotten not really any better in a division where I think, 2 of the other teams have gotten tangibly better. And that's sort of difficult for me to want to call that. But yeah, I think I would have to go with D just based on what they did do. It sucks that they had to slash payroll, but the fact that you had to makes your team worse, and your team got worse. So I think your offseason grade really needs to reflect that.
Yeah, I'm leaning F. I just feel like when I look at the roster, it's not like, oh man, there's so many clear holes that they needed to fill. And maybe that's what's like leaning me more towards D. But the fact that like you just look at their additions and subtractions, they lost so many major league caliber guys and then basically added Santana and Okert. And, no offense to Topa, DeSclafani, and Stalmont, but I think they're going to be more fringe guys. And you said they're in their mid 30s. They're not going to be contributing so much to this rotation or the pitching staff. I think they have enough pitching depth in terms of starters that they can turn to relievers or starters that can kick DeSclafani out of the rotation. Louis Varland right now not in the rotation, but he could be there. Matt Cantorino is coming off Tommy John surgery. I think he could be solid as well. So I think they have like enough guys. Even Jorge Alcala and Cody Funderburk were pieces of the rotation or the bullpen in years past and could contribute this year. So it's like I feel like they have enough depth, but there's just something about being in the position that they're in, like having the opportunity to like put a stake through the rest of the division and just choosing to not only not do that, but almost put a stake through yourself by just letting all these players go and not really adding anybody that's going to push this team over the top. Like Carlos Santana is going to be 38. Like I love Carlos Santana as much as the next guy, like one of my favorite players from the past few years, but he's not a needle mover. He's not a guy that you want to be relying on. Even if he is still as good as he was in years past, like a league average guy with the bat with no defensive value. It's just this lineup could use a little bit more help in the outfield. The bullpen and rotation could use, anything. I think it's mostly just about looking at the additions and subtractions and being like, they lost a bunch of good guys and they added not a lot of good guys. And I think that's going F for me because I would have loved to see them do at least something to stay competitive. And while I do still think they will be competitive, this is a product of them being in the AL Central and just, being afforded the opportunity to take it easy and still feel like we are the best team in this division, despite not doing anything this offseason. And I just wish they had done more. So while enough offseason doesn't make it so that they're not the favorites going into 2024, they could have easily set themselves far apart from any other team in this division by doing absolutely anything.
Yeah, I agree with that take for sure. It's just like you look at their roster, like I'm sure we're both looking at roster resource, and it's just like their lineup looks really kind of mid. Carlos Correa has been sitting at 5. He sort of had a disappointing season last year. It's like Carlos Santana is 38. Right now, the back 3 of their lineup looks so rough. like Matt Wallner, Ryan Jeffers, and Alex Kirilloff now, where it's like, okay, this lineup sucks. Byron
But you're
Buxton,
relying on so many guys that get injured too. Like
yeah,
when
Byron
Buxton
Buxton
gets
and
injured,
Royce Lewis,
Royce
like
Lewis,
both of those guys
and then your
extremely
lineup
injury
is
prone
so
guys.
bad. And then your
Oh
lineup
yeah,
is so bad when those guys are gone.
your lineup's extremely rough. Like even the back half of their rotation right now, you talked about like Cantorino and Varland. Varland, I like a lot.
Me too.
But there's question marks around him. Like he was not great last season. Like he had stretches where he looked pretty solid, and then he was not super good. Got sent back down. Like Disco is sort of what you're going to get out of Disco now. Like he's fine. Chris Paddock is kind of notoriously extremely mid now. I don't know really what the plan is with him. I really like their 1 through 3, and then the rest of it's kind of mid. Back after their bullpen, fine, but I don't know. It's like they don't really have any huge organizational depth either to sort of help that lineup. It's like a lot of the guys that they've had as like huge prospects to sort of try to build on have not really worked. Like Austin Martin, he's not even in their top 10, I don't think, anymore.
He's on Fangraphs, he's 6, but they also have Simeon Woods Richardson, who's in that same boat where they were big like additions to the team that didn't really pan out. I think Brooks Lee could be a guy that contributes. Pipeline, wow.
Yeah, Pipeline I think, has him literally at 20, and Simeon Woods Richardson's like Lee, 17.
Yeah, Brooks Lee could be a guy that helps out, but he is like, how old is he? Like,
he's 23. He's 23. Okay. Like he could come up, but he wasn't like. I guess he was fine last season in the minors. He had an 808 OPS. So I'm not looking at him.
That's not going to be enough, though. Like no, if you lose Buxton and or Royce, then it's like that lineup is just going down.
That's not even mentioning Correa, who's also been injury prone.
Yep.
That's like, I don't know. This genuinely, like their organizational depth at shortstop outside of Brooks Lee is Austin Martin and Nico Goodrum, who wasn't even playing in Major League Baseball last year. He was in the KBO. So it's like, what do you have to hang your hat on if one member of your lineup gets hurt, your lineup sucks. If 2 members of your lineup get hurt, your season's over. Like,
yep.
That's a really rough tightrope to be walking right now in a division that 85 wins should win you the division easy. Like running away 85, 86 wins, like the division's yours. The Twins, like, are they there? Yeah, if everything goes right, but that's if everything goes right, and everyone knows Major League Baseball, it's not the case. It's 162 games for something to go wrong.
They're on thin ice.
Extremely thin ice. Difficult one to call. I think I'm going to go with D just because I want to be more optimistic about them. I like pretty much all the Twins. I like pretty much all the teams in the AL Central outside of the White Sox, but that's obvious. And even then, I tried to be optimistic about theirs. I'll go with D if you're going to go F, just because I want to be a nice guy about it. But yeah, not looking great for a couple of these teams.
Good cop, bad cop. All right, I will run down the grades that we gave. The White Sox, I had a C, you had a B. The Guardians, we both had Ds. The Tigers, we both had Cs. The Royals, we both gave them a B. And then the Twins, I had an F and you had a D. No real great off seasons, but definitely a couple bad and mid ones. But that's AL Central. Like I said, go watch the last episode if you want to see our breakdown of the AL East. And then next week, this upcoming Wednesday, we will be doing the AL West. But yeah, that wraps up the AL Central review and grades.
That's right. And I think it's time perfectly to wrap up this weekend edition of Free Baseball by bringing in the closer.
That's right. We haven't had one in a while, but I had to choose a AL Central guy, and this is going to be a long one because this guy had a pretty illustrious career, and that's Joe Nathan. He had a 16-year career from 1999 to 2016, during which he pitched for the Giants, the Twins, the Rangers, the Tigers, and the Cubs. He was drafted by the Giants in the 6th round of the 1995 draft and debuted in April of 1999 versus the Florida Marlins at the age of 24. In that game, he tossed 7 scoreless innings, allowing just 4 hits and 3 walks with 4 strikeouts, and he earned the dub. He split time between the majors and minors in his debut campaign and even recorded his first career save despite appearing mostly as a starter. The case was the same in 2000 as he started 15 of the 20 games in which he appeared. He tossed a career high 93 1/3 innings pitched, but he struggled to a 5.21 ERA as he dealt with shoulder injuries throughout the season, which likely led to that inflated ERA. And those struggles bled into 2001 as he struggled to a 7.29 ERA at AA and AAA, didn't pitch in the majors at all. And it looked like his career as a starter might be in jeopardy, but he emerged from his slump late in 2002, just in time to toss 3 2/3 innings in September for the Giants. But then in 2003, he transitioned full-time to the bullpen and finally broke out at the big league level as a setup man. That year, he pitched to a 2.96 ERA and led baseball with 12 wins, the most by a reliever. And prior to 2004, the Giants then capitalized on his breakout by shipping him along with Boof Bonser, had to mention him, and Francisco Liriano to the Twins in exchange for AJ Pierzynski. Nathan would go on to have the best seasons of his career in Minnesota. They immediately made him the closer in 2004, and he responded with I forgot to put the banner up. There we go. With one of the best seasons of his career. He had a 1.62 ERA and 44 saves, earning him his first All-Star selection. He finished 4th in AL Cy Young Award voting and 12th in AL MVP award voting. And after the immediate success, the Twins inked Nathan to a 2-year extension that included a club option for 2008. And he rewarded the team with another All-Star caliber campaign in 2005. He had a 2.70 ERA, 43 saves, earned his second All-Star selection, and became the 3rd pitcher in Twins history to record back-to-back 40 save seasons. His success carried over into 2006, a season that can be considered his peak. He had a 1.58 ERA, a career best 0.79 WHIP, a career high 95 strikeouts, 36 saves, and he led the American League with 61 games finished. He finished 5th in American League Cy Young Award voting and 18th in MVP award voting. He became the 5th pitcher in Twins history to attain 100 saves. He finished the season 2nd on the franchise save leaderboard, and he also became the first pitcher in club history with 3 consecutive 35 save campaigns. And it didn't stop there. He would go on to post a sub-2 ERA in each of the next 2 seasons. 2007, he had a 1.88 ERA with 37 saves, which earned him a 4-year extension with a club option for 2012. And then in 2008, he had a career best 1.33 ERA with 39 saves, earning him his 3rd All-Star selection. And then he was excellent once again in 2009, 2.10 ERA, career high 47 saves, his 4th All-Star selection, and he earned the AL Raleigh's Relief Man of the Year award. He was a co-winner alongside Mariano Rivera. However, an injury to his UCL would put an end to that historic stretch of success. So from 2004 to 2009, 6 years, Joe Nathan averaged 70 innings pitched, 86 strikeouts, a 1.87 ERA, a 0.93 WHIP, and 41 saves. That's a 1.87 WHIP for 6 years. But that UCL tear forced him to undergo Tommy John surgery and made him miss the entirety of the 2010 season. But he returned in 2011, but was clearly a diminished version of himself, forcing the team to split his save duties with Matt Capps. He had a 4.84 ERA and 14 saves that year. Nonetheless, he surpassed Rick Aguilera to become the franchise's all-time saves leader. So after that down year, the Twins declined his option ahead of 2012, sending Nathan to free agency, where he signed a 2-year deal with an option for 2014 to play for the Rangers. Now a full 2 years removed from surgery, Nathan got right back on track despite being in his late 30s. In 2012, he had a 2.80 ERA and 37 saves, earning him his 5th All-Star selection. And in 2013, he had a 1.39 ERA with 43 saves as he earned his 6th and final All-Star selection. Weirdly enough, Nathan's option was declined after that season, and he hit free agency again heading into the 2014 campaign, allowing him to sign with the Tigers for 2 years with a club option for 2016. However, age finally started to catch up to him as he struggled in 2014. He had a 4.81 ERA and 35 saves, and he finished that season 7th on the all-time saves leaderboard. But his advanced age also affected his health, as early in the 2015 season, he tore his UCL again, necessitating Tommy John surgery for the 2nd time. At his age, it signaled an end to his illustrious career, but Nathan didn't back down. He missed the entirety of the 2015 season, leading to the Tigers declining his club option. But then the Cubs took a shot on him, and he made his debut for them in late July. Nathan pitched just 2 innings for the Cubs, though, before being DFA'd, and that allowed his career to come full circle as the Giants signed into a minor league deal. He was called up to the big leagues in September of 2016 at the ripe age of 41, and he pitched the final 7 games of his career in San Francisco, a career in which he racked up 26.7 baseball reference WAR across 923 1/3 innings pitched while striking out 976 batters. while pitching to a 2.87 ERA, a 1.12 whip, and recording 377 saves, which places him 10th on the all-time saves leaderboard. Here's some of the records that he holds. He is the highest save percentage in MLB history at 89.3%. He's got the second most saves in American League history with 374. He's got the third most seasons with 35 or more saves at 9. And he's tied for the third most seasons with 40 or more saves with 4. He also has the second most seasons with a sub 1.89 ERA. That's minimum 60 innings pitched. He's done that 5 times. And then if you add all that together, he's tied for the most seasons with 35 or more saves, a sub 1.89 ERA, and a sub 1 whip across a minimum of 60 innings pitched, and that's 4. So Joe Nathan was just incredible.
Definitely. So he's one of just 8 pitchers, that includes like 5 Hall of Famers right now, that have minimum 700 innings pitched, a 10-year career, and then a 150 ERA plus or more. He also is the Minnesota Twins all-time saves leaders, 260. And a cool Giants piece of trivia for you is, you know, whose roster spot he got to take when he made his debut? Barry Bonds. He got to take Barry Bonds' roster spot because he had to go on the injured list.
I just read the whole wiki like 2 hours ago.
Shout out to that guy. I read his Saber page. Shout out to him. Also, fun fact, won a World Series ring and has never actually pitched past the first round of the playoffs. So he got the World Series ring for the 2016 Cubs. They actually gave him one, even though he made 3 appearances.
Wow.
Hey, shout out to Joe Nathan. I think he should have stayed on the ballot for the Hall of Fame a little bit longer than
did
he
did.
He
fall off? Yeah, he fell off.
I think he did fall off. He was close. He was at like 4.7% and fell off because you have to get to 5%. I think in the future, once Billy Wagner gets in, and you can have the committees make more conversations about relievers, I think Joe Nathan needs to be heavily considered to be in the Hall of Fame. He's one of the best relievers of all time.
That's right. And it's crazy that so much of his success came after he was 30, because he was just so good in his mid to late 30s.
Yeah, he was extremely good.
That 6-year stretch
with
the Twins was
underrated
crazy.
Too.
Yeah.
He's one of the best relievers of all time, and nobody ever really is like, oh yeah, Joe Nathan's one of the best.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's one of the best ever.
When you look at it like we just did, like you can really see like that 6-year stretch with the Twins is like that's like legendary status.
Yeah, there was a season 2. I think he was one of the only ones where his 2 teammates both got top 5 Cy Young votes, where Yohan Santana won it, and then Joe Nathan finished 5th the same year Yohan Santana won Cy Young. Like, getting that many Cy Young votes when you're a reliever is always nuts too in the modern era, which is really cool for Joe Nathan. But that's all we have for this episode of Free Baseball. Thank you for staying with us. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter. It's on the screen. It's at DVSBird. That is my Twitter account. You can follow Jake Crumpler. His is extremely easy. It's at Jake Crumpler. And you can go check out his work on all the sites he writes for. Just like.
Yeah. Check out my work on pitcherlist.com and baseballhq.com. I should have an article coming out this week, maybe even 2 articles this week. Yeah. And then you can listen to my podcasts that come out often as well in the pen. And you can always find all my work at crumplerbaseball.com.
Definitely. So make sure you also check out the Athletes Hub at Athletes Hub on Twitter, and go to the athleteshub.org to check out their new work. I think Isaiah might join us on Wednesday to talk about his new article that he's writing there, but we're actually going to have new stuff on the website for what feels like the first time in forever. So check that out, and then make sure you're checking back with us on Wednesday so you can check out the AL West off-season review and more.
That's right.
That's all we have for now, though. Peace.